On July the 12th, Union General George Armstrong Custer's Michigan regiments cleared the town and returned it to federal control. Custer's men took several casualties in the fight, and those who were wounded were left to recover as the Federal Army marched back toward Washington. One of Custer's men who was wounded in the battle was Captain Pennybacker. He had received several deep saber wounds to his body, keeping him from leaving with the rest of the Union Army. Pennybacker's horse was an old, faithful stallion named Monarch that was stabled in the rear of the hotel and cared for by one of the grateful citizens of Hagerstown. Every day, Captain Pennybacker would call for his horse and have him brought to the front of the hotel where he could see and talk to his faithful companion.
Good job. Good boy. Good to see you. Good job there, Jedediah.
Thank you, sir.
Good care of him. I haven't seen you forever.
Pennybacker eventually died from his wounds, and the horse was given to the young man who had cared for it. Over the following years, Monarch would break away from his new master's stable and return to the hotel, awaiting the kind words of his master, words that never came. It's been reported on dark nights when no moon is visible, you can hear Pennybacker's faithful horse trotting to the front of the building. Sometimes, it's believed that you can even hear the captain's lonely calls in a desperate effort to make contact with his valiant steed. The city of Hagerstown has had a long, rich history. Even today, you can see some of the lasting results of the fighting in downtown. On the building that houses Psalms Jewelers, you can still see some of the bullet marks on the second and third floors. The stories we have visited are just a few of the stops along the Ghosts of Hagerstown walking tour. You can find out more about some of the other buildings and stories every October when the city of Hagerstown hosts the walking tours. Over the decades, Hagerstown has changed. Residents and visitors have come and gone. Buildings have done the same. But one thing that has remained is the history and legends that belong to the city of Hagerstown. From the central part of Washington County, we bring you here to the eastern part. This is South Mountain. South Mountain has always played an important role in this area. Its gaps and passes were natural passageways west for the early settlers. It provided natural defense from Indian attack. But most importantly, it was the site of the first battle between Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia and George B. McClellan's Army of the Potomac in the Civil War. What's become known as the Battle of South Mountain is our focus in the next series of legends. This battle played an important role in Lee's first invasion into northern soil, but it became overshadowed by the events that took place just a few days later, the Battle of Antietam. It was only just recently that this South Mountain area became recognized as an official battlefield site.
The South Mountain State Battlefield was created 2 years ago in June of 2000, enacted by a bill signed by Governor Glenn Denning that created the battlefield. It is the first state-operated battlefield in the state of Maryland. All the other battlefield sites are operated by the National Park Service. So we're pretty fortunate in the fact that we finally were able to get this proclaimed as an official Civil War battlefield.
In this final segment, we'll bring you an update on a legend we brought you in our last Legends program. And we'll take you to one of the oldest sites in Washington County. But first, we will take you to the little Frederick County town of Burkittsville. This quiet little community lies just at the base of the southern portion of South Mountain, below a break in the volcanic folds called Crampton's Gap. We travel back to September 1862, when the Civil War, for the first time, brought its horrors to northern soil. Early that month, Confederate General Robert E. Lee began to move his army northward into Maryland.
Lee moved the Confederate Army of Northern Virginia to Leesburg, where he gathered the various elements of his army, and then will begin to cross at White's Ford, which is on the Potomac River and not far away from White's Ferry. They're two separate places. Just to the east of Leesburg, and crossing over into Maryland, they will come up to Poolesville and by various routes arrive in Frederick. all of Lee's army will be crossed the Potomac River and into Frederick by the 7th of September.
Lee felt that a victory on northern soil might help France and England to recognize the South as an independent state. He had also hoped that by moving into the virgin fields of Maryland, it might help relieve Virginia of supplying the Confederate Army with food.
He has very high hopes for this campaign, that this could be the winning campaign for the Confederate States of America.
Several days after Lee crossed into Maryland, McClellan began to cautiously pursue him by moving northward from Washington. McClellan and the Army of the Potomac reached Frederick on September 13th. McClellan learned that Lee had moved out of the area just days before. Unfortunately, Lee's next move was unknown to McClellan. But while staying in Frederick, McClellan's luck changed when a Union soldier found written orders from Lee to the rest of the army wrapped around a cigar.
Part of Lee's plans assumed that once he moved into Maryland, a Union army would be forced to come out of Washington, D.C. and pursue him, that the Union government could not afford to let him wander at will through western Maryland, which was quite correct.
Special Order 191 detailed Lee's Maryland campaign. It laid out his plans to split the Army of Northern Virginia into 5 parts. 3 parts were to march toward Harper's Ferry to put pressure on the Union garrison there, 1 part to travel to Hagerstown, and the last part